Hi, my name is Samantha Sapper, and the topic that I researched for this project is the Three Strikes Law. For those of who don't know what the Three Strikes Law is about, it is basically about a law in which makes a previously convicted felon go to prison for 25 years to life after his or her third conviction. Okay, so what is the major issue? The Three Strikes Laws had good intentions when it came into place in Colorado in 1994. Basically, the overall concept of the Three Strikes Law is good. It was meant to keep felons off the streets. However, it now stirs problems due to the enforcements and the debate of whether or not it actually does keep felons in prison. We'll talk more about this in a minute though. So why is the issue a problem? Well, people argue that for one, prisons are becoming even more crowded due to the judicial system throwing felons convicted of a third crime straight to prison. No, ifs, ands, or buts. Also, this is a problem because some say it is unjust in certain situations. Victimless crimes is a good example of this, since it doesn't really make sense to throw someone a life sentence when they haven't even hurt anyone. And how is the issue impacting the people involved? Well, in a news article, the author Tybee gave us an example of one man named Curtis Wilkerson. He was convicted of a felony in the early 80s, and after more than 10 years in the mid 90s, I believe, he was caught stealing a pair of socks that would have cost him like $2.50. Because this was Wilkerson's third offense, though, he was sentenced to 25 years to life for stealing those pair of socks. Many people do not agree that a small offense like petty theft should result in a life sentence when, if it was someone's first crime, it would just be a misdemeanor and not really anything too big. So, Governor Hickenlooper, I think is his name, plans to draft a bill eliminating the Three Strikes Law in Colorado. So I would present to him both the pros and the cons. And the pros for the Three Strikes Law is that it is an effective deterrent for felons to commit another crime. Like if this is going, if once they already commit their second crime, they're gonna be more hesitant to commit another, just because if they do commit, another one, then they would be going to prison for life. The Three Strikes Law also is a fixed system, so repeat offenders stay in prison. So basically, it's a fixed system, so if someone commits a third offense after a felony, we make them stay in prison. There's no way about it. However, some cons for the Three Strikes Law is that it adds more criminals to an already crowded prison. There's already, people wanting to, people releasing prisoners that should have been there for longer but can't because it's just too crowded, and the Three Strikes Law just adds even more people to prison. Also, convicts often settle for a plea bargain on the first two offenses, and so they could be falsely accused of committing a crime. So oftentimes, if it's your first offense, you'll just give into a plea bargain, which is usually less than the actual sentence, but it could still be a felony, so they're kind of being set up for the Three Strikes Law. And the last con for the Three Strikes Law is that it creates no flexibility in the court system. I mean, their only option is life in prison. There's no, any chance of anything less. And so, how can we fix this? The first step would be to reform the law. The third offense should be a non-victimless felony in which life in prison seems highly reasonable. Also, it should be made possible that a panel of jury can deliberate on whether or not the Three Strikes Law should come into effect. And then how would legislation vote? Legislation would vote in favor of reforming the three strikes law just because the cons heavily outweigh the pros in both quality and quantity. There's a lot more pros or cons than pros, and the cons the cons matter so much more than the pros. And so there are the citations for the 3 journal articles, and then there's a news article and a book on which I used for this. And then here are my references for the pictures I used in this slide.